Welcome to the JCT screencast on Subject Learning and Assessment Review meetings. This screencast aims to provide support for English teachers and English subject departments in developing their understanding of SLAR meetings. This screencast focuses on growing our understanding of the SLAR meetings for the oral communication classroom-based assessment. There is a corresponding screencast which focuses on the SLAR meeting for the collection of the student's text classroom-based assessment. This workshop was originally developed as a 2-hour in-school support package for teachers. As a result, there will be moments in the screencast where we will recommend that you press pause to engage in some of the activities that we have in the workshop. If you are watching this as a subject department, it would be important that at this stage a facilitator is nominated from within your group to support your engagement with the activities. The screencast can also be viewed by individual teachers who wish to find out more about SLAR meetings. It may also be useful to have the English specification, which can be found at www.curriculumonline.ie, available to refer to throughout the screencast. We have also developed handouts to accompany this workshop. These are available on our website, and it would be useful if everyone in the department had a copy of the handouts if you are planning in engaging in the activities and discussions that are built into this workshop. The purpose of the screencast is outlined in our learning intentions and success criteria. During the screencast, we hope to deepen your understanding of the purpose, structure and value of SLAR meetings and show how working with our colleagues can enhance our understanding of the classroom-based assessments. Our hopes will have been realised if you have developed a greater understanding of the structure, purpose and value of SLAR meetings, and if you have begun to identify ways in which SLAR meetings may further contribute to the collegial and individual development of subject learning in your English department. The first question that we need to consider in this screencast is what exactly a subject learning and assessment review meeting is. According to the 2015 Framework for Junior Cycle, a subject learning and assessment review meeting is where teachers will share and discuss samples of their assessments of student work and build common understanding about the quality of student learning. In essence, SLAR meetings will become an integral feature of subject learning across junior cycle. The purpose of the SLAR is, therefore, twofold. It will help us to build a common understanding of the quality of student learning, but will also provide us with opportunities to share practice and learn from one another. SLAR meetings centre on positive professional interactions. SLAR meetings are a new aspect of assessment for all junior cycle English teachers in post-primary schools in Ireland. For effective SLAR meetings to take place, we need to have caring and supportive staff rooms, which encourage us to learn with and from one another, and allows room for us to learn from our errors. According to John Hattie, professional relationships truly develop when there is a peer culture among teachers of engagement, trust and shared passion. We feel the SLAR meetings hold exciting potential in this regard. With this in mind, if you are watching this screencast as a subject department, now might be a nice moment to consider the ways that you already work together as a group. If you are not watching this screencast as a subject department, now might also be a nice moment to think about possible norms that work well or could work well in your subject department to ensure positive ways of working together as a group. SLAR meetings will require members of the department to bring examples of student work to be viewed and discussed by other members of the department. Later in this screencast, we look at some of the practical arrangements that will need to be in place for the SLAR meetings. But for now, we will focus on generating norms which will help ensure these meetings run smoothly. Timekeeping and focusing on an agenda may be some norms for your meetings, while parking the ever-pressing corrections, silencing mobile phones and limiting comings and goings may be other considerations. As a department, now might be a good time to pause the screencast and discuss the questions presented on screen. This workshop centres on enabling teachers and subject departments to engage in effective SLAR meetings. But before we can actually look at the nuts and bolts details of SLAR meetings, it is important to first set the context and gain an understanding of where the SLAR fits in as part of the wider junior cycle English learning journey. All of what we experience in engaging in a SLAR meeting feeds back into the wider learning journey taking place across the 3 years of junior cycle. There is a separate screencast which provides an overview of the junior cycle English learning journey, an image of which you can see here. Now might be a good moment to press pause and spend a few minutes viewing that screencast. Let's now zoom in on second year and the check-in assessment point that takes place here. As with first year, second year is very much grounded in creating rich learning experiences for our students. Providing rich learning experiences for students is supported in the English specification through the strands, learning outcomes, and content guidelines. There is an important assessment check-in point that takes place towards the end of second year in the form of an oral communication classroom-based assessment, or CBA, which aims to capture the rich learning that takes place in our classrooms. Significantly, a subject learning and assessment review, or SLAR meeting, is a feature of this assessment point. Let's now go through the nuts and bolts details of the oral classroom-based assessment. If you would like to take a more detailed look at the oral communication CBA, we have created a screencast to support teachers and subject departments in preparing for the oral communication CBA. As you will see on the screen here, the oral communication CBA centres on specific learning outcomes, which you will find in your SLAR screencast handout. Now would be an opportune moment to take some time to read and discuss these learning outcomes, as well as taking time to consider all of the details surrounding the oral CBA as they appear on the screen. Press pause now to do so. So if we remind ourselves of what a SLAR meeting is, according to the 2015 Framework for Junior Cycle, a subject learning and assessment review meeting is where teachers will share and discuss samples of their assessments of student work and build common understanding about the quality of student learning. Key to taking part in a SLAR meeting, therefore, is having samples of students' work to share and discuss, which raises some queries around how many samples we should have or how we might go about sharing them with colleagues. The next series of slides attempts to provide some clarity around this, in particular with reference to collecting samples of students' oral communication. There is a lot of information in the following slides, all of which is taken from the assessment guidelines, which can be accessed on www.curriculumonline.ie. This line from the assessment guidelines offers us some guidance as to how teachers should collect samples to share and also how many samples we need to collect. Teachers will record samples of oral communications by students that they will use for discussion at the subject learning and assessment review meetings. An example at each of the 4 descriptor levels, where feasible, will be needed for this purpose. It is important to note here that recorded samples may be either audiovisual or audio. A teacher's professional judgment is key to deciding on the recording medium best suited to a student's oral CBA and to give our colleagues a fair representation of a student's work. It is also important to note the wording where feasible. If all 4 descriptor levels are not present within a class group, then a sample of all 4 is not possible. A teacher should only collect a sample of the descriptor levels evident in the class grouping. The final point to note here is that samples of our assessments of students' work need to be shared with a facilitator prior to the SLAR meeting. We'll look at how we might go about this in a moment. This then begs the question of how a teacher will identify students to record. Another line from the assessment guidelines offers further clarity around this. The teacher's decision on the particular students to record will be based on the range of achievement as he or she would predict at the time based on students' previous performance. Therefore, teachers' professional judgment, underpinned by a good understanding of the features of quality, with knowledge of the student's strengths and areas for development, will be important factors in identifying the sample of students to be recorded. You will see some key issues highlighted for you here. In order to support schools in planning and preparing for SLAR meetings, we have organised this screencast into key issues that you will need to consider as a subject department. These questions or issues focus on before, during and after the SLAR meeting. Given the previous lines from the assessment guidelines, which you will find in your handout, around the recording and sharing of samples of students' work, certain issues which may need to be considered are presented here on screen, all of which are very much dependent on an individual school and teacher context. In terms of actually recording students, how will you record samples to bring to the SLAR meeting? How will you go about sharing them with your facilitator? In relation to identifying students to record, will you identify students to record in advance? Or will you record students and then decide which ones are for the SLAR meeting? If you are a subject department watching this screencast together, or if you are watching as an individual teacher, now would be a very good time to pause and consider the questions on screen. A final question to consider as a group or as an individual teacher is, are you familiar with the features of quality and how to apply descriptor levels to students' work? The features of quality for the Oral Communication CBA can be found in the assessment guidelines on www.curriculumonline.ie, but for your convenience we have also added them to the handout that accompanies this workshop. For each classroom-based assessment, the NCCA have articulated reference points that describe performance at 4 different levels. Features of quality are the criteria that will be used to assess the student work as best fitting one of 4 descriptor levels: exceptional, above expectations, in line with expectations, and yet to meet expectations. When using the features of quality to assess the level of student achievement in a CBA, teachers use on-balance judgment. According to the assessment guidelines, a 2-stage process will operate when applying the features of quality. In oral communication, teachers will make an initial judgment while watching and listening to a student carrying out the oral communication as to whether the student has yet to meet expectations. This will establish a basic threshold for what is considered to be in line with expectations in relation to the features of quality. If appropriate, the teacher will then proceed to move up through the descriptors until one is reached where the student's oral communication clearly does not match all or nearly all of the features of quality. The student's oral communication will therefore be assessed as being at the preceding descriptor level, where it is clear that the student's work matches all or nearly all of the features of quality at that level. The best way to determine how this works in practice is to try to apply the features to the examples that are already available online. This way, you will have had time to really familiarise yourself with the criteria in advance of assessing the Oral Communication CBA. The NCCA have provided us with examples of students' work, some of which you will be invited to view in a moment. When familiarising yourself with the features of quality in advance of the SLAR meeting, you may find these useful. We'll move on now from the before stage into the during stage of a SLAR meeting for the Oral Communication CBA. During the SLAR meeting, teachers will discuss assessments of students' work and try to form a consensus on standards. The subject learning aspect of these meetings is hugely valuable as they provide a space for teachers to reflect on pedagogy and share practice. In terms of conducting the meeting itself, it is important that as teachers we maintain our professional objectivity, focusing our attention on the assessments of students' work and being committed to building our understanding of standards. We have now come to the end of part 1 of this screencast. Please open part 2 to continue with this screencast. Thank you.